Hi YouTube, and welcome to Tallinn, Estonia. We've been here for the last couple of days and it's been a really beautiful city, and would definitely recommend people come to visit. Even though it's a little bit cold at the moment, it's raining, but it's still a wonderful experience to be here. So it's been a while since I uploaded my last vlog, and I have been meeting with various organisations through Belgium and Germany and France. So I thought now's a good time to just do a quick summary of just some main points that I've noticed as I've gone through, and I hope that you find this interesting as well. So I thought that I'd make note that from the people I've been speaking to and meeting with, there's an overriding focus of an evolution of the current employment programs overarching here in Europe. So a lot of the programs that are in place now came into being following the global financial crisis, and they were heavily focused on obviously getting people into work or education to help them with their future career prospects. One of the more interesting points that's come through on numerous occasions is that a lot of younger people now are focusing on wanting some flexibility in their working life, as well as tackling the underemployment rather than just employment. And that was something that we do see in Australia as well. So we had some really interesting conversations about what the next stages of employment programs could be, as well as the difficulty challenges of how do you measure the outcomes. Now, I mentioned outcomes because generally the requirements of various employment programs want to get people into work, and as a baseline it's a good starting point. So when you look at the unemployment rate, it gives you a baseline of how many people are employed versus how many people aren't. But because there's a number of growing industries within the gig economy and casual jobs, a lot of younger people now are actually employed, so may not necessarily fit that statistic, but they are underemployed. So the work that they're doing doesn't necessarily give them the financial freedom that a more traditional 9-to-5 type of job could and would have. One of the other points that came up on numerous occasions was looking further to the future. So where the gig economy and casualisation is growing, and a number of younger people are preferring to have flexibility, or at least appearing to want flexibility and movement, how do we make sure that the social security for them towards the end of their working life is still intact and able to support them, where the way that they're contributing to work now may not necessarily be as secure as historically it's been. So that was just an aspect that we had a really interesting conversation about, that obviously many younger people won't be focused on. It's obviously something governments will be focusing on to think longer term, and making sure that we're able to support the societies that we live in, particularly because obviously we're in a moment of change at the moment. So it will be interesting, and I think how we make sure that occurs will probably be different than we've done in the past as well. And of course, the other aspect of this is the employers who are also running businesses and needing to make their industries sustainable in the same turbulence of change. So whereas historically maybe people wanted a job that was going to be ongoing, obviously now more people are transient in their working life, jumping from job to job and industry to industry. And there's a bit of a push-pull here, because obviously if you looked at an organisation and a company, their goal is to be around for as long as possible. And historically, obviously, having a longer term staffing quotient, if you want to call it that, was seen as a positive thing. But in order for businesses to attract and retain younger people means that they need to become more flexible, but often this can be at loggerheads from what the company itself is trying to do. And it's almost like all three pillars are changing at the same time, but not necessarily at the same pace. So at the moment, I think everything's slightly out of sync, where younger people are wanting flexibility. The employers, maybe within the jurisdictions of what their industry can allow, don't always have that ability to have the same flexibility that they, could possibly offer the employers, or might not want to, because their business demands aren't flexible. I mean, if you're running a cafe, you need to make sure things are done at a certain time and delivered at a certain place by a certain standard, and you can't just be flexible with that and go, oh well, we might deliver your order or we might not. So some industries will obviously find their feet in a changeable environment, but I think eventually we'll hit a level playing field, but we're not there yet. So it's how do we build those bridges to make sure that industry, people and providers and government all walk together. And of course the final pillar that I didn't actually mention before was also education. So how do we make sure that education remains relevant, and rather than probably being as blocked as it is obviously in your younger life, while we all know that everyone's constantly training and upskilling, the role of education, I think, is also evolving. If you think back to maybe when you were in school, you relied on the teacher for information, and so it was really information coming to you to then learn and retain, whereas right now we've actually got more information than probably any generation prior. So anyone can have a look on Google or YouTube and find information that might even be more advanced than your teacher or lecturer. So it's supporting education to support people to learn new skills. In other words, how do you tell what information is real or not real, relevant or not relevant? And again, I still think that's in a transitional point because everything is moving so fast. So while you might learn something in a course, 6 months later it could actually be obsolete. And the role of education is critical because it will give you a foundation, but maybe the actual tools of what you've learnt need to be constantly evolving all of the time, and whether or not everyone's mindsets have changed to that as well is an interesting thing we had some conversations about. So I think that probably 100 years from now we'll look back on this period of time and recognise it as it is a really significant turning point or transition point for society as a whole. And obviously the purpose of my fellowship is to look at ways to get through this transition and come out the other side and thrive. So I'd like to hope we'll be able to all work together to work on that. And I think the other thing just to make note of is that it is a big period of change, and everyone handles change very differently. And I think one of the best quotes I've ever heard is that people only agree with change that they agree with. And very often the changes that are happening can be quite disruptive to people, and no one openly puts their hands up and says, yes, I want my whole life turned upside down or my whole industry turned upside down. So there's an element of being, patient with people as well, and being, I'll say, gentle with yourself and also others, because it is an unknown ahead. And, if you think about it from a, local perspective or even individual perspective, it can be challenging enough. But we're actually moving through a society change on a global scale, and we're not all on the same page and going at the same rate, but we're almost expecting everybody to just be okay with that and keep on. And I think we're doing a really good job. I just think that probably we need to take a longer term focus rather than just the next 6, 12, 18 months, maybe even 3 years, but actually look ahead and go, what is it our full goal is that we're trying to achieve here? So look, I thank you for watching this vlog. I hope you found some of it interesting. Tomorrow we'll be leaving Tallinn. I have one more appointment while I'm here, and we'll be going on a bit of a road trip, so I hope I'll be able to send some uploads of how we go driving from Estonia through to Latvia. But until then, see you later.